العافية فاطفي بعبادي وادخل جنة صدق الله العظيم. اللهم نقرأ فاتحة رحمة على أبنائنا جميعا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. لا بسيطة ما عندنا شيء نتقبل زيارتكم.
I'm here to try to help 5 Bulgarian nurses and 1 Palestinian doctor who they've been given the death penalty in Libya. They've been accused of maliciously spreading HIV. What led me to my interest in this story?
First, there was an article in the Washington Post, which the Clinton administration, it was reported, had declared HIV to be a national security threat, that there were going to be so many deaths from HIV, from AIDS in Africa, that it would end up toppling governments and changing the political complexion, possibly for the worse on the African continent.
The next story that I came across was one about a study that indicated 40% of the spread of HIV in Africa might be from unsafe medical practices, i.e. reuse of syringes, not cleaning medical equipment like from blood transfusions. And that story was amazing in that the WHO, the World Health Organization, and the United Nations, in their fight against AIDS in Africa, the entire thrust of their fight is safe sex, safe sex, safe sex.
Since this was brought to the attention of the WHO and the UN, let's say about 5-6 years ago, approximately how many lives might have been saved if there was a serious safe syringe program?
Well, it was really brought to their attention from the first studies that they did in the 80s. But let's say that they were able to clean up the healthcare system from 88 with clean blood and safe injections. What we're talking about is in Africa alone is 7-8 million unnecessary infections, and more in Asia. So we're getting close to 10 million just by the lowball estimates. If you consider from the evidence higher estimates, then it becomes much worse.
This is the conventional syringe, the syringe that I feel has played a big role in spreading HIV. It was very apparent by the early 1980s that the reuse of syringes was a factor in the worldwide spread of HIV. There's nothing on this device that will protect it from being reused. The National Institute of Health, the NIH, funded the development of a much safer syringe that not only would protect the healthcare workers from needle sticks, but would prevent the global reuse of the syringes. Here's the syringe that was developed from this grant. After a single use, the needle automatically retracts into the barrel of the syringe and it can't be reused again.
I decided to travel to Nairobi, Kenya and visit the major AIDS conference there. It's called ICASA, and find out, is there any truth to this business of reusing syringes, this business of unsafe medical practices? Is it really possible that this is contributing largely to the spread of HIV? Thousands of delegates from all over the world and leaders of various countries are gathered here at ICASA, a major AIDS conference. There's nothing on the agenda about reuse of syringes. I shudder to think of the number of people in Africa who get their sex education from people like this street preacher who is standing right outside of the conference.
A man should only do sex with his wives, only. And the wives should only have sex from their husband. A man should not marry more than 4 wives. And one wife is better. If a man has one wife and he is committed sexually to only that one wife, that man will never have HIV.
You talk, we die. These demonstrators all have HIV. Most of the attendees are scientists, doctors, economists, and researchers. With all this expertise, I have to wonder why on the main agenda there wasn't any program to address safe health care. This is especially unusual when there are now safer products available.
What percentage of AIDS do you believe in Africa is primarily from sex versus, let's say, medical instruments?
I think the debate is there. People wanted to bring certainly the issues around the remedicalization of the fight against HIV/AIDS. I don't think so. It is really a major percentage is due to medical instrument in Africa. I think the major part of infection is a certain link to sexual transmission, heterosexual transmission.
What percentage do you believe, we were talking about the medical instruments and...
I think not more than 5%.
My father was the first to die in 1990 and my mother died in 1992. And during the day, there's a brother of mine who was born in 1988, and when he was born he was HIV negative because they had to test him at the hospital. You know, at the hospital, they always test people when they are born. So he was negative. And there's a time we traveled up country on Western Kenya, just at the shores of Lake Victoria, when we were taken for injection against malaria. Because if you go there, if you come back, you might get malaria, the virus, the malaria virus. So when we were being given the injections, the person used 1 syringe on all of us, on the whole of family. We were 6 of us, my parents and 6 children. That was 8 of us in total. And they used 1 needle on all of us. And after some time, early this year, when that younger brother of mine, who has been sick all the time, he went for a test on HIV and was found to be positive.
At this point, I didn't think I had a lot of evidence until I got a phone call from a Nairobi city official who requested that I go with him somewhere. He also requested anonymity. He would be fired if it was known that he revealed this to me. He took me to the Nairobi city garbage dump. These trucks, the ones that come from the hospital, are tagged. The garbage dump is run by gangs, and they have children, all of whom have HIV, go through the garbage and get the medical supplies, the syringes, gloves, masks, empty vials, and they would then take these and sell them in fake pharmacies all throughout the country. But we need to shoot this today. This is too important. No one believes this about the needles. No one believes it. Yes, sir. Hi.
Hi.
People were very surprised to see me, especially the children. Rarely has anyone shown up on a Sunday morning with a large camera. My first surprise was
there's a syringe, just a second.
Was a syringe in one of the sewers. These are open sewers. There's no storage pipes running through the slum. Went to several pharmacies and no one answered the door. Again, it was Sunday morning at 10.
And finally, we found one which was open. They provide counseling services, well man and woman clinic, and the person that owned the clinic agreed to speak on camera.
Some of us have been using the needles. The needles always come here without being packed. So most of us, we get infected with some diseases such as HIV, and we end up being treated without using the needles that are necessary to be used.
So are these dirty syringes right here?
They are dirty syringes.
And they're for sale?
Yeah, and they are for sale. We've not even used them, but they have been brought when they are dirty.
Let me see it again. Just a second.
They are not even packed. You have so many friends dying from AIDS. Not that they have the carry, but they are brought up by the needles without being packed.
When you say needles not being packed, what do you mean? They've just been picked up from the garbage and then they're sold with no wrap package on them?
Yeah, they are just picked from the garbage and they are not sterilized. The syringe are normally charged at a cheaper price. So the doctors normally go for them because they are the cheapest and they can make a profit by using the cheaper ones. After they get them from the garbage, they use them more than 20 times. Often they don't even wash them. This is a big problem all over Africa. When people go to the doctors, they don't normally worry because they know the doctor knows what he's doing and they are sure of what the doctor is using on them.
It is a horrifying reality that syringes are being reused in Africa. I wanted to find out from someone on a government ministry level what they think.
At the moment, the manufacturers are making disposable syringes which they send into our countries. We've been buying them. And the assumption here is that you use it once and you throw it away. But in actual practice, what has been happening is that, most of these syringes are reused. And they are reusable and they have been reused. But this is a very big problem.
Why is this issue so important, the issue of safe injection and safe healthcare? Well, there are 29 million, almost 30 million infected Africans with HIV and AIDS. By 2010, almost 50 million Africans will have died of HIV and AIDS. Now, WHO has figures of 2% transmission by unsafe healthcare. Other studies show between 28% and almost a third of infections may have been transmitted by unsafe healthcare. If in 1990 safe injections had been introduced, this would have prevented almost 30% of all infections. That would only be 7 million infected people now. That's a staggering difference in numbers. Up to 90%, or in some countries it's 99%, for example in Uganda, of injections are given for therapeutic reasons. One study showed that of those, only 50% thought they were safe injections. There are 16 billion injections a year. The issue really is about providing safe healthcare. As a physician and a doctor, when I work, I want to have the knowledge and the commitment that I'm providing the safest healthcare to my patients and my customers. And when I testified at the Senate in the US, and I stood up and I said, how can I ask people to practice safe sex when I know I'm not giving them the safest healthcare possible?
I visited an AIDS orphanage. These children don't have HIV. Their parents do and have become either dead or incapacitated. I found, though, that there were a lot of children, actually, that have HIV and their parents are HIV negative. And this means that likely they got it from visiting a clinic. There was a discussion, nearly a debate at ICASA, and the WHO happened to be present.
This is a typical picture from an African setting, and it shows needles and syringes sitting in a pot of water. Next slide. And that's the point. And using an environmental analogy, the solution to pollution is dilution. That is, syringes and needles are commonly rinsed or washed after being used. Next slide. And after one flush with water, there's a 70% decrease in the titer of HIV in one study. 2 flushes show a 95% decrease in titer, and if bleach is used, this further enhances disinfection. Next slide. Note also that this happens to be a boiling pan. Next slide. Needles and syringes are commonly boiled or heated between use. Heating HIV to 80 degrees centigrade inactivates it within seconds, and heating it to 60 degrees inactivates it in less than 1 minute.
I'm extremely troubled by the comments of Dr. Schmid on several levels. First and foremost, as a mother with children who have been immunized, I would not feel at all comfortable with anything but a sterile syringe used that I know had never been used before, and also a single-dose vial that could not be contaminated. Also, as a healthcare worker, a nurse myself, with friends who have contracted hepatitis and HIV from needle stick injuries, there's no question, there really is no debate that this is a route of transmission and this is a risk. I'm reminded from an early conference I went to at Mount Sinai in the United States, and listening to a CDC officer refer to the risks that had been outlined from needle stick injuries. And he said, in terms, if it's you that's concerned with this, whether it's your child, whether it's you yourself, there's no such thing as high risk, medium risk, or low risk. It's either yes risk or no risk.
To the first comment, the criticism that I downplayed the importance of unsafe injections in HIV transmission. I did not. And as I indicated, the 50 to 100,000 people who acquire HIV infection to the estimated 2.5% are an important group. I then followed that by the statement that we can all agree that we should work towards ending unsafe injections. I believe that. I think we all believe that. The issue is how many resources we devote right now to ending unsafe injections and what the benefit of that shift in resources would be. If we think the answer is 20 to 40% of cases could be prevented right now, then we really should devote a large proportion of our prevention resources to ending unsafe injections. But they will come from other interventions and prevention activities that, in fact, if the true percentage is more like 2.5% or less, that would be a bad shift in resources. And so that is the reason why I try to put into perspective the 20 to 40% versus 2.5%.
I think the first issue is whether or not we tell people what we know is true. And we have WHO or UNAIDS telling UN employees to watch out for healthcare in Africa and bring your own needle, and we do. And yet, when we come to how do we accelerate action against AIDS in Africa, what's the missing prevention methods? It's all about, there's no mention here about healthcare risks. There's a lot of worry that Africans will be scared away from the healthcare system if we tell them what is the condition in the healthcare system.
What is the rate?
After the conference and I was putting up my equipment, Dr. Schmidt happened to walk past me, and I asked him if he would take an injection from a syringe that still had any element of contamination, even 1%. He looked at me and glared and just continued walking.
Just to let you know that I have been trying to pay attention to tradition.
Now we shall see the laws that divine sex in the divine nature. Have you ever seen a goat going to mount a female dog? You know this animal very well. It's a type of a bird. We stay together at home. I'm an idol jogo for Swahili. Do you know this book? Unajua kitabu hiki? Is there anything wrong in doing sex? Kushukua pussy. Yeah. Wangu na ungo wa kiume. On the other picture you can see a man has decided, this is my time, this is the wife of a cock. Ametaja kuwa mke wa jogoo. Sex has taken place. You understand?
When I got back from Africa, I read about the nurses and the Palestinian doctor getting the death penalty. And it seemed like an extremely good example of what I was finding with my exploration so far in Africa. So I decided to fly to Bulgaria, meet the families of the nurses, find out what type of people they are.
Снежана беше моя приятелка, която така с много желание и любов, макар и малко по-късно в годините, реши, че може да се запише и може да учи за медицинска сестра. Това беше продиктувано от нейната голяма любов. Тя се записа, учи и завърши за профил детски сестри. Познавам Снежана Димитрова от първа акушеро-гинекологична болница Света София, град София, където с студентски групи провеждаме обучение на специалност акушерки. Многократно сме осъществявали контакти в болницата с нея. От моите лични контакти аз имам впечатления изключително положителни за нея като човек. Тя е изключително отговорна личност, с много слънчев човек, с много високо чувство за отговорност и с голямо желание за придобиване на медицинска специалност.
Аз съм посещавала нейната болница, туберкулозната болница, която е в Бенгази. И имам впечатление, че болницата наистина беше страхотно мръсна, страхотно неуредена и определено трудно се работеше. На няколко пъти съм я посещавала. Казвала ми е, че се употребяват спринцовки, които не са така добре дезинфекцирани, както би трябвало да бъде навсякъде по целия свят и в Европа, както и в нашата държава. И че на много пъти е правило впечатление.
Maybe the best evidence of the lack of infection control is the two official reports of WHO teams who visited Libya during 1988. Especially the second report of the WHO team is full of evidences concerning the lack of supplies, lack of infection control. There was a bad sterilization, no incinerator. The ELISA equipment doesn't work, not only in the hospital but in the blood bank too, which means that the blood was not screening properly for HIV, HCV and HBV, which is a normal practice. So these two reports of WHO point the causes of the epidemic. First of all, it was the lack of materials, the bad control. We have a lot of facts showing that the lack of materials, dirtiness of the hospital are the main reason for this outbreak.
The Minister of Health of Libya in 1997 told the audience that the situation with HIV in this particular hospital in Benghazi started early 1997. The exact timing of Bulgarian nurses' arrival to Libya was February 1998. So all evidence led me to a simple conclusion. There was no physical possibility of the Bulgarian nurses committing such a crime. They were out of Libya by the time when this epidemic wave started. And there were also scientific proofs that the infection could not start in the Children's Hospital of Benghazi in the way described by the prosecution in this trial.
The WHO expert made reports concerning the cause of the epidemic in this hospital, and they presented this to the Libyan government. But this report was not good at all for the Libyans, so maybe for this reason they asked the WHO for confidentiality and to be classified these reports. Of course, hiding these reports hurt the nurses and it changes completely the truth. If we have to blame, first of all, is the chief of the hospital, the medical doctors, of course, because the nurses only make injections under the supervision of and order of the medical doctors.
Imagine in your country, your government, a report's done on how reused syringes are spreading HIV in the medical workplace to patients. Imagine the President or Prime Minister requests that government agency keep that report confidential. This is exactly what happened in Libya. The report was not even allowed to be used to defend the nurses.
On the eve of the decisive court session, political speech of the leader of Libya was aimed at HIV problems. You can imagine what court would dare to question the political leaders of his country. Such a political statement at this particular moment was regarded by me as a political sentence of our nurses.
These are the Bulgarian nurses, Palestinian doctor, and Christiana's husband, Stravko, who was later released. They were held for over a year without any idea what they were charged with, but that year included torture for some of them.
والسابعة والعشرين والحادي والأربعين والثاني والأربعين والأربعة والأربعين والسادس والثلاثين والسابع والثلاثين والتاسع والثلاثين بأن يدفعوا متضامنين على سبيل التعويض المادي لكل من المدعين الثاني والثالث والخامس والسادس والسابع والثامن والعاشر والحادي عشر بعدم قبول الدعوة لرفعها على غير ذي صفة في شأن كل من المدعى عليهم بصفتهم الثامن والثلاثين والثامن عشر والتاسع عشر والعشرين والحادي والعشرين والثاني والعشرين والثالث والعشرين والرابع والعشرين والخامس والعشرين والثامن والعشرين والتاسع والعشرين والحادي والأربعين والثالث والأربعين والرابع والأربعين والخامس والأربعين والسادس والأربعين والثامن والأربعين والخمسين والسادس والستين.
Their defense was not allowed to enter hardly any evidence which would have proved them to be innocent.
والحادي والسبعين والثاني والسبعين والرابع والسبعين والخامس والسبعين على سبيل التعويض المادي والمعنوي لكل من المدعين 106 وال108 وال110 وال112 وال113 وال114.
These Libyan citizens are ecstatic that the supposed killers of their children have received the death sentence. I have run, though, into people throughout Europe and the US, other African countries, that really don't believe that Libya will execute these nurses. But under the Kaddafi regime, execution is always possible. There's never a demonstration in Libya without authorization from the authorities.
Before 6 years, we are waiting for this moment, and we say thanks to God.
If you notice, all of the signs are manufactured in the same manner.
Yes. And so you will appeal in front the court in, yes.
Tripoli, in Tripoli.
The court is...
Supreme Court, Supreme.
Всичко е въпрос на време. Това е, което най-много ни тормози и ни измъчва и ни докарва до лудост, нали? Иначе ето, от днеското нещо състане нищо още не сме разбрали. Абсолютно нищо.
Във вестниците пишеше, че българските медици са задържани като свидетели последствие. Обаче, колкото повече време минаваше, аз се чудех как може да бъдат задържани като свидетели последствие, като нито се обаждат, нито пишат, абсолютно нищо. Людмил Спасов не казва нищо, другите преди него не казват нищо, Надежда Михайлова мълчи и най-накрая ни повикаха във външно и ни дадаха обвинителния акт, в който пишеше, че те са убийци, отровители. Това беше най-убийственото писмо за мен. Аз цяла нощ не спах тогава, защото знам, че това не е истина. И най-после, след една година се разбра, че те са жестоко обвинени и малтретирани. Харат Дербал е плювал на лицето и взимал е пепел отдолу, от земята, мажел е по лицето и тя казвала: майко, майко, майко ти, тя ще ме чуе. А той го разбирал, мисля, че това е на немски, го разбирал: мой Боже, майн Бог. И тогава казвал: къде е твоята майка? Къде е твоя Бог сега да те спаси? Била е вързана и отзад, е така, отзад ръцете и е висяла. Гола и бита. Пускано е ток 10 пъти. Това ми каза на един Великден преди 2 години, когато ходихме. Има белези на пръстите, на краката и казва: когато ми пускаха ток, миришеше на печено месо. Когато ми ставаше лошо, ми заливаха с вода и пак ме връзваха и пак ме измъчваха.
Спомням си, даже сега си спомням така първата снимка, която видях. Това беше 2000-та година, февруари и март. Когато ги погледнах, роднините те изглеждаха много зле, но в очите им четях, че те ще се борят до край. Преди това даже бяха излязли вече и така слухове, че са били, ние тогава още не вярвахме, че са изтезавани, са измъчвани, че са били държани без светлина. Още не го вярвахме, но тогава, когато погледнах, думите се потвърдиха само от една единствена, и то черно-бяла факс снимка. Това беше така първия визуален.
أشرف أحمد جمال حجوج. أشرف أحمد جمال حجوج. كريستيان بن نور الدين عبد الحميد درمان.
Защо отлагат? Има причина. Има причина. Добре, толкова много неща искам.
When I heard this wild story that this was a CIA Mossad plot, I did more research. I found out that supposedly an agent called John the English delivered vials of HIV solution to the nurses at a coffee shop on top of a hotel in Benghazi.
За мен това дело е абсолютно измислено по невероятен шпионски сценарий и българите са въвлечени в него като едни бедни и беззащитни жертви, точно толкова колкото са и либийските деца жертви на спина.
Ми казаха, имаш ли забратка? И аз казах, да, имам, вземи я. Аз бях много озадачена. Казвам, може би някъде трябва да си облека, като да си сложа, може би някъде някакво височайшо лице ли ще ме види. Аз трябва да съм с забратка като арабка. Не можах, просто не можах. Защо искат забратка, нали, която да взема? Сложих я в чантата, а забратката беше за да ми вържат очите.
I think that maybe it was a mistake that from the beginning all the people went to the direction of conspiracy. And those people are conspirators. And then the police was affected by this idea.
Страхувах тогава, когато се отрекох от самопризнанието си. Още беше в полицията, още не бяхме стигнали до съд, когато аз им казах, че всичко това е лъжа. Аз тогава се страхувах, че сина ми и въобще и близките ми, и българите могат да разберат такова нещо, че нали, аз съм убийца или това ме ужасяваше и казвам, аз така или че те ме убиват, защото те наистина, ако още малко бяха продължили една или две седмици, може би аз нямаше да издържа, поне психически нямаше да издържа. И затова се отрекох. Тогава се страхувах от всичкото това, което се говори. И след това вече минаха може би 5-6 месеца след към края на 99-та година. Си казах, че с Божията помощ някога истината ще излезе. Някога истината ще излезе наяве. Както и започва да излезе. Минаха много години, минаха 4-5 години, но общо взето съм била винаги оптимист. Да съм свободна. Никакви други мечти нямам. Първото, което искам да съм свободна, искам да се прибера в България и да видя близките си. И нищо друго не искам. За сега. Искам да им кажа, че много ги обичам, че много ми липсват и да потърпят още малко. Както аз търпя, да потърпят и те още малко.
Unfortunately, I think up to now, I think a kind of pressure was exercised on those people, and this is illegal, and it's something bad, and that's why we have to re-evaluate the whole process, because there was pressure.
Ролята на Сейф Ал-Ислам според мен е една доста противоречива роля и да вземем за пример преговорите, които в момента се водят с Германия за разрешаване на проблема от 1986 година. Значи на повърхността нещата изглеждат добре и може човек да се обърка, че там нещо се е задвижило, но всъщност изобщо не е така. Значи ролята на Сейф Ал-Ислам е на човека за мръсни поръчки. Всъщност то е новото, брутално търговско лице на Либия и там просто става въпрос за пари. И това е модерното лице на мръсния бизнес. Той обикновено навсякъде по света се нарича фундация. Това не е за първи път. Либия не открива топлата вода в този смисъл. Навсякъде по света сделки на ръба на закона или извън, корупция и подкупи до голяма степен минават през фундации и той е това. Неговата роля ще е да договори цената.
Libya has had a terrible and very prolonged human rights
record of failures that has lasted from the 1970s until today. It has included the execution of political dissidents both inside and outside of Libya. It has included the jailing and torture of dissidents, non-violent dissidents at home, crimes relating to the Lockerbie bombing. This has just been a non-interrupted litany for over a quarter of a century, and it's all been under General Kaddafi. He is one of the longest-running dictatorial strongmen in the world today. Amnesty International, the United States, has in the past routinely condemned Kaddafi for his human rights crimes. His pattern of human rights violations has not changed. These are international reports of Amnesty. They issue them every year, and these are just three from 1978 and 1988 and 2000, spanning, as I say, decades and now into a new millennium. And country by country, they list these horrors, and Libya has had the same kind of crimes. Torture is a norm in Libya. It's been a norm for almost 30 years, non-stop.
Have you talked with your father about the case, and what does he think about that whole thing?
I think my father encouraged me to do my duty regarding this case, and also he is against the idea of conspiracy, and in general he's against any conspiracy, and he told me, you know, they are nurses and they should be angels and not devils.
От Абдулмаджид. Най-много от него. От Джума Мишли също, от Харп също, но на първо място от Абдулмаджид. Всъщност белезите на краката, които ми останаха, са от него. От няколко нощи пускане на ток, от затоплянето на жиците, които бяха вързани на краката ми, прогориха кожата и месото и всъщност от него ми останаха тези белези. Абдулмаджид е този доктор химик с очилата му. Да, доктор химик. Най-зловещите ми спомени са от него. Той просто така е роден да бъде садист. Не. Не. В никакъв случай. Има кой да се погрижи за това. Иначе... И нищо на никого няма да се размине. На всеки, който е направил добро или който е направил лошо, няма да му се размине. Така че за отмъщение... Не.
Придобият повече пари, тъй като финансово е доста изгодно да се работи в тази арабска държава. И може би това е основната движеща сила, която Това е основната движеща сила, за да отидат те да работят в Либия. Разбира се, парите, които получават в болниците там, са значително повече, отколкото заплащането им в България. Адаптацията на тези хора там също е нещо много трудно, тъй като те идват от един съвсем различен свят, европейски.
When I got back from Bulgaria, I heard about the World AIDS Conference in Bangkok and decided to take the case of the Bulgarian nurses to it because no one seemed interested in helping them.
We called this press conference this morning because we're deeply troubled that at this most important AIDS conference that there's not even one attempt or one session regarding unsafe health care in Africa or Asia, even though reports indicate that somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% of HIV transmission can be attributable to unsafe health care and unsafe injections. In light of the fact that at this time we have nurses being held in a Libyan prison because of being accused of deliberately transmitting HIV in approximately 470 children that have contracted HIV, we find this deeply troubling.
They've been accused of transmitting HIV through careless medical procedures. I don't know what they did, but I can say that those procedures are universal. I would say if these people are liable, so are the top people at WHO, UNAIDS, and others, because they are trying to not only not act on this issue, but in fact suppress knowledge about this issue.
The court case is claiming that the infections happened after the Bulgarian nurses began to work in the hospital, which dates it to not before February 1998. Very likely somebody picked up HIV someplace who went to the pediatric ward. It could have been a 15-year-old, it could have been a 1-year-old baby that came from another country in Africa, or somebody with an infected mother someplace. And that child infected something that infected another child, and then it went from there. What we do know is that there's about 400 children, over 400 children infected with pretty much the same virus. Some of the people who testified for the defense, Montagnier and Colisi, have looked at the records and said, well, it looks very, very clear as if there were some cases from 1997 and maybe even earlier.
So if you go to this hospital after 1999, the procedure, I imagine that is perfect, because doctors know which procedure use when they know that there is infection inside the hospital.
There's been an evolution of ideas regarding syringes, and it's unfortunate. When I was at the World Health Organization in the early 90s, we were talking about promoting non-reusable syringes, and unfortunately the idea is just beginning to catch on in other places. So that the real problem has been injections that have been unsafe, and the need to reduce the number of injections, get rid of unnecessary injections, and at the same time have equipment which is more foolproof.
HIV risk is a two-way street. People can be infected from unsafe health care as well as from sex. If you look only one way, you may be hit from the other way.
In the mid-80s, WHO came out with an investigation showing that the spread of HIV and hepatitis among children was coinciding with their own immunization programs. And I think that was a trigger to ask us at the industry to develop a so-called auto-disabled syringe. And the idea behind that was that you would get a syringe that you could only use once. No matter how you would manipulate with it, if you could use it once without being able to refill it again, that would prevent the spread of HIV.
One of the exhibitors at the AIDS conference, whose booth is shown here, was actually responsible for keeping safe syringes off the market for many years. Becton Dickinson didn't have a safe syringe in 1997, but they denied competitors who had safe syringes access to healthcare supply markets. They did this through a conspiracy to monopolize the market. In 2004, they paid a settlement of $100 million in an antitrust lawsuit that alleged just that. This company put profits before the welfare of millions by preventing safe syringes from being available to people who needed them most.
Tell me what you're doing.
Handing out t-shirts and hoping that they spread the word. And that's about it. There isn't much time to tell them the message, so we're hoping that it will just create some awareness, and then maybe they come back to the issue later on when they have time.
Just because we feel we need to get the message out and the mass media isn't picking it up, and certainly the conference organizers haven't picked it up, so it's just basically doing everything we possibly can while we're here to raise awareness of the issue, and hopefully as people wear the shirts people to stop and think about it. We've had lots of interaction with people. People come by out of curiosity. We get into discussions. I've just talked to 2 women from Uganda who again emphasize that in Uganda it wasn't sex alone. Uganda's had a great success because they're promoting safe healthcare, and I wish this conference would finally wake up to the fact that the biggest AIDS prevention successes in the world have been around the issue of safe healthcare.
Thank you. Hi. Hello.
Hi. Do you know the story of the Bulgarian nurses?
I'm nurse. Thailand.
There we go. So you're a group of Thai nurses.
Okay. Thank you.
You're a Thai nurse.
Yes, Thai nurse.
Ah. I hope you never get the death penalty.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Piot and others at the conference have said the pandemic is growing out of control. If that's the case, after 20 years of investing billions of dollars on HIV prevention and perhaps 15 or 20 conferences like the one here in Bangkok, and they still haven't made a dent on the epidemic, it suggests to me it's time to have other people look at how things are being approached, go back to the drawing boards, and begin with equality in HIV prevention. Safe health care is a necessary part of protecting people from HIV, hepatitis C, hepatitis B, and other terrible diseases.
Now I have 3 recommendations that I'd like to make. First is that the World Healthcare community end the current practice of silently accepting unsafe healthcare and iatrogenic HIV in Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. And not only the World Health community, but also the world press. This message, it's not that it hasn't been recognized, it's been actively repressed. We have been making this case, but when the people who organize this conference put it on, they don't put it in. And they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to share the spotlight with this. It's not, and I think the message that we need is that HIV risk is a 2-way street. You can get hit by HIV through sex, or you can get hit by HIV through blood exposures and healthcare. And if you're telling people when you walk across that street, just look one way, that's not good advice. That's killing advice.
Colonel Kaddafi, is the first time where I'm addressing you publicly, but I think that you should recognize that if there are errors in the healthcare system in Libya, you can't only point to the nurses. Your country has a very, very high rate of hepatitis C virus infection, which suggests that there's been careless use of blood needles and syringes and medical procedures for many years. I think it's very important that you focus attention on the issue. You can make a great service to humanity, both by letting these people go and saying that Libya is going to lead African countries in ensuring that healthcare is safe.
The most amazing thing I learned at the World AIDS Conference in Bangkok was the idea of safe healthcare wasn't even on the agenda. Even if they say it's 2 or 3%, it would seem like there would be some type of program that you would have. I'm heading to Rome right now to try to find Dr. Kalizzi. If you remember, Dr. Kalizzi had actually identified the strain of HIV and had done a study as to how it spread. Possibly the children had the HIV prior to the arrival of the Bulgarian nurses. The other thing I'm trying to do in Rome is visit Bambino Gesù. A plane load of 80 of the children from Benghazi arrived. One of the children died later that day. Is it possible that the children had not been treated in Libya after they'd been identified with HIV? The other thing I want to attempt is, I've been in touch with Maria, remember the physiotherapist in Bulgaria. Her mother worked near the hospital in Benghazi and was friends with Christiana and knows a lot about what happened. Actually, possibly is a witness to what may have spread the HIV.
The technology is based on the amplification of the small amounts of DNA found in the serum of these children. And these equipment are the G amplification system. With this technology, we identify all viruses present in this Libyan cohort. And most interestingly, we found that the virus which infected patients in a period of time in which the Bulgarian nurses were not present in the hospital, the same virus infected other children during the nurses' presence in the hospital. This is allowed to say that there is a nosocomial infection already before the arrival of the Bulgarian nurses in the hospital.
The children arrived in the middle of the night from Libya. They were many more than 50. They came with all their families. And the only solution for me and my staff at the Children's Hospital Bambin Gesù, where I am the director of the Division of Immunology Infectious Diseases of the Department of Pediatrics, was to actually try to see them before coming to the hospital.
We organize a sort of screening of these children and the immediate admission into our hospital Bambino Gesù of the more serious cases of these children. So since from the authorities of the airport, they select some of the children for immediate admission. And one of these child was so serious that died after 1 hour of the admission into the hospital.
Грижата за болните хора не е никога била на ниво. Никога. Злоупотребите, които стават в болниците, и лошата хигиена, липсата на всякакви стерилни материали. Всичко това е в основата на драмата Либия, на трагедията Либия.
There are many causes of nosocomial infection. The most common is the sharing of a syringe.
They were unhappy to be forced to use disposable syringes many times. One of them complained of being forced to follow these practices. And then she was threatened to be punished if she raised once again a similar question.
As a normal citizen from Libya, in which they are struck by this infection that was completely unknown, they can consider that this is an infection caused by a different way. For example, still in Africa, in which there is more than between 10 and 40% of women and men and children are infected by HIV, they are still thinking that the virus was built in a Western laboratory.
Кое е важно според мен? Важно е да кажа, че последните 2 години аз живеех заедно с матроната, т.е. главната сестра на супервайзера на детска болница, една унгарска сестра, Джудит, която всеки ден, връщайки се от работа, ме уведомяваше. Ние разговаряхме, ние се тревожихме за това какво става там с спин изследванията, с всичките лабораторни позитивни резултати и бехме в невидение защо и откъде и как става това и защо се случва това. Така постепенно нещата започнаха да се задълбочават и бройката на спин позитивните да се увеличава. Нямаше никакво обяснение. Намесиха се явно правните власти и в този случай първият задържан, знам от Джудит, защото всеки ден, прибирайки се от работа, ние си говорихме вкъщи за това. Първият задържан беше унгарска сестра, която работеше в Милкрум, в стаята, отделението, където се приготвяше млякото. За след 3 дни я освободих. Представа нямам пътя по който. След това беха задържани филипински сестри. След 1 седмица нямаше седмица и тех освободих. Върнаха ги на работа. Разпитаха ги и ги върнах. След това полски сестри задържаха. Не мога да си спомня колко, то не беше вчера. Но в края на краищата имаше някакъв инцидент с полска сестра, която беше паднала, хвърлена от селмени един комплекс жилищен от 6-ти етаж. И имаше, шушукаше се за някакво споразумение между фактически либийските власти и полското консулство, и по такъв начин и те ги освободиха.
Аз си обяснявам така, че може би са нарочени да бъдат българки.
Why Bulgarian? There was more than 100 nurses from outside, coming from outside Libya in this Benghazi hospital, in Children's Hospital in Benghazi. But they take the sentence of death only to 4 Bulgarian nurses and 1 Palestinian doctors. Why Bulgaria? I cannot remember, just because we are here in St. Peter's Square in Rome, that just 15-18 years there was a tentative killing of the Pope here, and immediately the Bulgarian Secret Service was considered one of the major responsible for that. Now we are a similar occasion in which the sentence say that the Bulgarian Nazis, together with the Secret Service from Israel and from the United States, make this crime.
Пак искам да кажа онова, с което започнах. Кадафи уби собствените си деца. Системата им.
What I'm proposing to Colonel Kaddafi is that he take action not against the nurses. I'm suggesting that he champion the fight for clean medical instruments. It's likely 2% chance that I have success, but at least I try.
Well, today's the day. I'm in the Heathrow Airport on the way to Libya to interview some of the approximately 400 children that got HIV in Benghazi. And ultimately, the attempt to see Kaddafi and to save the Bulgarian nurses.
It's my first night here. Very little dialogue, a real nice man's helping me from the Kaddafi Foundation. I've been told I can't take the camera and just wander around and shoot. I have to have a permit that comes from the media department. One of the things I've sort of suddenly become aware of is I believe they have the concern that if I'm pushing the fact that syringes are a big factor in blood transfusion equipment, that maybe weakens their case against the nurses. I think that is actually going to be an issue this week. I have no shooting schedule. They indicate there's a big event happening, which they didn't tell me about before I got on the plane, and in 5 or 6 days they should be able to help me. Sitting in a hotel room for 4 days without anything happening. I'm being hosted by the Kaddafi Foundation. They're very, very busy, but they haven't had time for us to have dinner, anything like that. In fact, they took me for one meeting that lasted 3 minutes. I had 3 minutes to explain the point of the film in reference to the syringes, and that this is a problem all over the world. And the solution isn't hanging nurses. The solution is giving them what they need, giving them the supplies. And on the way back, the person who's working with me from their foundation stopped, got on his cell phone out of his car, and a moment later he pointed towards my hotel a few blocks away and says, "Hey, there's your hotel, walk." I started to say something, I don't mind walking, but more and more the feeling is growing that they have concern that pushing the point I'm trying to make about syringes, reuse, clean health care, could undermine their death sentence. I'm not sure what I'm going to do if I can't interview the children. I believe that's much the core of the story, is the children. One of my concerns too is what I learned at Bambino Gesù, that by the time the kids get to the treatment at the hospital in Rome, they're in horrible shape. Possibly they don't want me to see their treatment or lack of treatment.
The WHO has a pamphlet they give new employees. This pamphlet suggests that they bring their own supply of syringes when they travel to Africa, because it states that syringes are often reused or dirty in Africa. My question is a philosophical question, ethical question. Why not tell the African people the same thing? We asked a bioethicist this question.
La WHO sostiene che non bisogna dire agli africani che vengono utilizzate le stesse siringhe per curare diverse persone. Forse perché nel caso in cui venissero a saperlo, non si sottoporrebbero ai vaccini per la malaria, per la febbre gialla, per altre malattie che sono ancora oggi devastanti. Questo significa che il personale medico e paramedico europeo può disporre a proprio piacimento della facoltà di scegliere degli africani. Certo, forse se venissero a sapere che c'è un uso improprio delle siringhe, si rifiuterebbero di sottoporsi a cure mediche. Ma il punto qual è? Nel terzo millennio, nel millennio delle grandi scoperte scientifiche, ci sono poche persone che ancora decidono per altre, e le altre persone appartengono ad un continente lasciato alla deriva, lasciato a se stesso. Continuare a considerare gli africani esseri umani di serie B è la vera tragedia.
I'm here to ask some of the Libyan opposition leaders whether or not they feel that possibly Muammar Gaddafi is the one who's responsible for the deaths of these over 400 children. Did he frame the Bulgarian nurses and Palestinian doctor to prevent himself from being blamed?
Gaddafi has never allowed any syringes nor medicine to all the hospitals and especially Benghazi.
Let me make sure I get this straight. The nurses worked at the hospital there. They say there were no syringes. So you're saying that Gaddafi stopped syringes from coming to Libya?
That's right.
Yeah, I think Gaddafi, during his 36 years of ruling, have done a lot of crimes against humanity, against Europeans, against Americans. He even have his fingerprints on some unsolved cases in Africa and Latin America. Gaddafi will do anything possible to put away any blame that could have been put back to him.
You ever have fear?
Yeah, of course. Gaddafi has a history with that. Gaddafi did assassinate about 15 people during the 1981-82 in Rome and Bonn and in London and in Athens. So we're always fearful about Gaddafi and his tactics. Gaddafi supported all the way the November 17, the Greek terrorist organization, the Basque terrorist organization, the IRA, and he even supported some radical movement and groups in Latin America. And he was responsible for the killing of a number of unsolved cases that Libya nor the Libyans have any issue what to do with it.
This has been a normal part of political behavior under Gaddafi's regime. So even though this has received a lot of attention globally and most of the world has moved towards ending the death penalty, the fact that these nurses are under a sentence of death at the moment, they certainly could be executed, and if they were, that shouldn't be any surprise to anybody that follows this topic under Libya today. It could happen.
Understanding what happened in Libya regarding this dramatic case involving the Bulgarian nurses and Palestinian doctor is crucial to understanding what's happening in the rest of Africa. These political machinations occur all across the continent of Africa. Something has to be done to change the WHO's policy, the whole policy of health care, public health care around the world. Looking at the number of HIV cases that will exist in the next 5 to 10 years is dramatic. The amount of people just from syringes, if the situation means 20% are getting it from reuse of syringes, that's 15 million new HIV cases. Something's got to be done.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Military Television Channel Bulgaria. I'm Pavel Donev. Today our guest is Mickey Grant from Dallas, Texas. Hello, Mickey.
Hello, Pavel.
Mickey, you have made 4 trips to Bulgaria investigating the situation with our nurses, and recently you traveled to Libya in an attempt to meet the Libyan children as well as our nurses. What happened, Mickey?
One day it would look like, yes, I can interview the children. Next day, no. Finally, this man that was behind the scenes helping me, he's a businessman, he had dinner with the Minister of Interior, and the Minister of Interior indicated that he would get my permission. And so they had me to delay my return because it looked like the entire trip was quite a failure. And the next day I met with the people at the Ministry of Broadcasting to get my permit for shooting, and they turned me down. Any country, any other country that I would suggest, Kenya, anywhere in Africa, that I want to come and see how some children are doing that got HIV, to bring some world attention to them, to try to help get them aid, do everything to help stop syringes from spreading HIV. Normally I would be welcome in such a situation. And to me, it was very suspicious why they didn't want me to interview the families.
So, Mikey, do you think that there is a way these nurses to be guilty? I mean, I have already asked you these questions a few months ago. What do you think now?
There was a reported assassination attempt on Kaddafi in the Benghazi area. It's not substantiated, but there's a lot of rumor to that effect. And some of the rumor has to do with that afterwards he withheld supplies, medical supplies and other supplies, food, to Benghazi. I haven't been able to establish whether that's true or not. I had worked in Sudan in the past for a NGO, non-government organization that was providing food, And I'm real aware that in order to get food to the people who were suffering famine, they had to get food to the Sudanese and medical supplies to the Sudanese military. And for the most part, those were sold on the open market. I would make a guess that same thing during the embargo, which basically cut off the flow of oil out of Libya, that there's real possibility that millions of dollars of medical supplies were sold too. If this is true, and then if Gaddafi in effect was the one to blame, then if I was Gaddafi, I would be doing everything possible to make sure that in no shape, form, or fashion did the blame come towards me. Coming up with the fact that it was a CIA Mossad plot to kill Arab children, hey, that's a game plan. And without any question, I do not believe the nurses are the responsible party. I believe Gaddafi himself is responsible. Does it scare me to say that? Yes, it does. Having been to Libya and then also being aware of how they had assassination teams kill people in Italy who opposed him. Anyone who opposes Gaddafi is in prison or they're murdered.
We have here our children here. We have big problem in the world, you know. We want solution for it.
What kind of solution do you want?
You know, we give them the peace, they give us HIV for, you see, all the children here. About 426 child. You know, this is all dead. This children, this is dead. All dead. All dead. All dead. About 46 child dead now. And will continue for.
Do you believe that Bulgarians are guilty?
I believe, yes.
Why? Who told you that they are guilty?
They're guilty because our people were in Al-Fatah hospital. Okay? We gave them, they were in good healthy. When get out, they get HIV. Okay? You understand me?